Just a quick side addition here before we get into the meat of the panel this afternoon. This ad reminds me of sitting in a movie theater and watching the initial ads before the movie starts. And so since I'm here from Statistics Canada, I have to put in for the shameless plug on behalf of all Canadians that there was data released today on the health of movie theaters in Canada. So statcan.gc.ca. Every single day, Monday to Friday, we release data and insights on something happening in Canada. So when we talk about the theme here of today's Accelerate Gov being how do you mobilize data for decision making, just wanted to put that one in your basket, that's you can subscribe and they'll send it to you every day. But another thing released today was around people's experiences of accessing accessible documents, which is also hugely important when we think about data, digital transformation, and how everybody can equitably participate in accessing government services and programs. So once again, statcan.gc.ca. So my name is Catherine Stevenson. I am the Director of Data Integration Infrastructure. And I will just say I've recently moved to that job. For the past 4 or 5 years, I was leading StatCan's innovation program. So somehow these two are linked, like figure out how to get in the trenches with innovation and then move into an operational space and see what does that actually look like day to day. It's a great segue for the topic of this session, planning for uncertainty, a new approach to project management. If you were joining us upstairs earlier today, often in the innovation space, you hit hard against some of the rules and structure around official project management in the Government of Canada. There was another panel on advancing digital projects. And again, looking at how can we kind of project or predict where tools are going to be, what kind of resources and skills are going to be required, what it looks like in a production maintenance mode. How do we predict those things in a world that's constantly changing? So, no pressure on the panelists, but I'm looking for their authoritative responses to these questions in the next 30 to 40 minutes. You are also welcome to pepper them with very challenging questions. There are 2 microphones in the room. So the format for this session is I will introduce the 3 panelists. They'll each say a few opening remarks, and then I invite you to come to the microphone and ask away, and we'll have an interactive session until about 3:42. I'm a data nerd, so we like precision, right? 3:42, and then we'll wrap it up so that you all have a chance to zip upstairs and grab some refreshments before the 4 o'clock session. And I will remind you now that at 5 o'clock, there's a reception also upstairs. So some things to keep in mind if you're starting to feel a little hungry or thirsty. Okay, moving right along. I am excited to introduce you to, on my far right, Minaz Tabassum, hopefully I got your name right, IT Project Manager in the Corporate Services sector at Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat. In the middle, we have Scott McNaughton, Director of the Digital Investment Office at the Government of British Columbia. And here beside me, we have Len Bastien, Senior Assistant Sorry, I was ribbing him about that earlier. Senior Assistant Deputy Minister at the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat. So I'm going to turn the mic, well, you have your own mic, so I'm not going to actually give it to you, but I'm going to invite you, Len, to start with a few remarks, please.
Thank you, Catherine, for 2 things. One, not calling me Leonard. That was great. But I'll get back to you about the senior stuff. So it says Treasury Board. I don't have a mic apparently. Okay. Did I turn it off by accident? I might have turned it off. I'm titled here as the Treasury Board Secretariat. I just want to emphasize I'm actually going to speak to you from my recent experience as the CIO from National Defence for the last 10 years. And from that position, I had oversight on their capital IT projects. And so just, to clarify a rumor, we actually do know how to deliver IT projects in government. We just don't celebrate it enough. During my tenure, we delivered, dozens of projects worth billions of dollars, successfully, on time, mostly on budget. And we needed people who were very good at their jobs. And so I would just offer, again, a public service announcement that there are some great project managers available. What have they had to do to make all that happen? Well, mostly work within a construct that is very difficult. One that, frankly, we're in our own way most days. The kind of initiative we're trying to do is usually looking at some kind of new capability or some deficiency to an existing capability that needs to get fixed. And we projectize everything. So one of my statements today I want to make to open the dialogue is not everything is a project. But to get access to the authorities and the money and the discipline and mandate and support, we have to make it a project. And we force fit these things into a framework that's great for buying ships and planes and tanks, but not so great if you're trying to do digital, especially if you're trying to do it fast. So today, I don't have all the answers, because certainly a rearview mirror is always clearer than what's coming over the horizon. But I'm willing to open up the conversation and listen and offer some suggestions to provoke perhaps a good idea, a good thought, a good session. Some of the things include, we traditionally look at identification of a good idea. We look at options analysis, and then we go seeking authority from Treasury Board to say, hey, can we have project authority? Do you mind if we invest more money than we just did? And just to put things in perspective, on a good project, I couldn't get out of my department in less than 2 years. So I get told we want something. It takes me at least 2 years to get the internal authority and investment in place to be able to get something that Treasury Board will recognize and accept and give me project authority for, where I'm allowed to spend more money. And then I got to go back to Treasury Board to get contract authority to be able to get a provider online so they can help me build. So if you're a house owner, this is like imagining with your spouse or your partner what you'd like to have. You spend 2 years thinking about it. You go to the city, you get a building permit, you get the money from the bank, and then you spend the next 10 years building what you thought of what would be 3 or 4 years ago. In digital, you can imagine what has left you behind already. It's 6 months, actually, things change so quickly. So this system is great for risk management, not great for getting digital services out the door. And I think that's where the conversation is going ultimately. I have a few more thoughts, but you know what? I'll save them for the questions because I got a feeling we'll be talking about that.
Sounds good. Great start. Scott, over to you.
Okay. I think, Len, you and I are going to be really good friends. So I'm Scott McNaughton, Director of the Digital Investment Office in the Government of BC. And I'm actually going to talk a little bit about what I think Len was bringing up in his remarks, but also give you a little bit of context about the situation in BC, because I think it's important to this conversation. And I actually see it as one of the fundamental blocks to effective digital transformation in government. So starting with some very, very basic things, we have two types of expenses in government, or at least in the government of BC. We have what are known as capital expenses, which provide economic benefit to government. Think about the ships, the planes, the boats, the roads, the bridges, that sort of stuff. And we have operating expenses. So those are ones we're all familiar with. Those are the ones that if you needed more money, you'd go to Treasury Board and beg and plead for more money. This matters though, because we treat digital as a capital asset. So we treat it as having future economic benefit to government, and it goes through a completely different process and is, from an accounting perspective, treated completely differently. And that matters a lot. So just keep that in mind. When you do go and build an IT thing, a digital thing, you spend capital to build it. So let's say $5 million. You have to do something, the same thing you would have to do with any other capital asset. You have to do amortization on that asset. So similar to how when you buy a new car and you drive it off the lot, it starts to lose value because you're using it. The exact same thing is happening to all of the digital things we build based on how we currently treat them. The difference here is you ask for capital from me, I give you capital. But to pay off the amortization, you have to use your operating budget. Your operating budget in the provincial context is also what pays for hospital beds. It's what pays for social benefits. So I am asking you in the current system to make a trade-off between direct service delivery to people and what is essentially an accounting expense. And I'm sure you can start to imagine where some of the perverse incentives start to kick in with this kind of system. That's not to say that we're not having a lot of success in the BC government. We are trying to nudge the system in the right direction. We are seeing a lot of projects. We're seeing projects that are decreasing in cost, decreasing in length of time. We're seeing projects that are hitting their targets, like what was said before. Like, it's not like we're bad at delivering digital projects in government. We're just not talking about those successes enough. So they are there if you look for them. Key operating word being look for them. But this brings me to my main point when I talk about digital funding. And I think that this graphic is a very illustrative representation of the fundamental problem of digital funding in government today. So when you have a problem, something is broken, you come to someone like me or the equivalent at the federal government level and you say, please give me capital. I need to fix this problem. Please, please, please. Here's a 45-page business case. And I swear I've thought of every single possible scenario that could ever happen over the next 10 years. Please just give me a lot of money. I'm like, oh, sure. Why not? I think you're going to do a good job. Here is a ton of capital. Go forth and build. And you do it. Varying degrees of success, hopefully not as bad as Phoenix, but hopefully better than that. And you come up with your digital product. And we say, wonderful, congratulations, pat on the back. Now you have to pay amortization. And you also have to pay for support and maintenance. And you say, well, wait a second, I don't have the budget to do that. I say, not my problem, you took the capital. Now it's time to pay the price. And so you pay that amortization price. The problem is, software is a lot like fish. And if you don't do anything with it, it's going to start to smell bad. And it's going to start to smell bad fast. And since you don't have any operating, you are not touching that product. You have no money to do anything with that product. And so it stagnates. And then it says 5 years there, but I know the truth. We all wait maybe 30 years. Eventually, you can't ignore it anymore. And you come back to me and you say, hey, Scott, I need more capital. You're now stuck in the vicious cycle of capital. You are now stuck in a cycle that is not how we should be doing digital funding in government. And what we're proposing in the BC government is what we're calling an iterative funding approach to try to tackle this problem. This is where we actually inject more operating into the system, allow people to build product teams of public servants who live and breathe a digital product for its entire life, who are there to plot out its roadmap, do constant iterative development, continuous improvement. And the little yellow lines that you see there, those are what we call the moments of surge capacity. That's where your minister makes a surprise announcement without telling you. And you're like, oh, Scott, I need to get a new feature in there and I need to get it in 1 month. Great, here's a bit of capital for surge, go hire a contractor, get it done. Or other kind of situations like that. And that might be a bit of an extreme example, but we have a few ministries in the BC government who have to face that every now and then. So that is what we are proposing as the new approach to doing digital funding, and is my hypothesis and what I would pose to all of you of how we need to change a fundamental aspect of how we do digital funding if we are to realize all of the things we want under the digital government agenda.
One more.
We're ready for it.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. My colleagues here covered a lot of great information, but I'm going to take a different take on it. I know we all heard the word agile a lot throughout all of the sessions today. But what I want to focus on is the mindset and the cultural shift that we need in government in order to become agile. And then I'll share a personal anecdote. So for me, I consider myself an agile leader. Let's talk about what that means. The old school methods of leadership depended on people to plan and predict and dictate and lead. However, we are talking about uncertainty in this new environment, so we need people to lead with agile mentality. So what that means is you need to empower and trust your people. You need to be ready to get uncomfortable daily, and you need to be really good at facilitating collaboration and conversations. So before I move on to the challenges that we face in the government, let me share a personal story with you. Just a show of hands, how many of you here been to Newfoundland before? Oh wow, a lot of people, that's great. It's a beautiful province and I highly recommend that you visit, but it's also a province where we get a lot of snowfall and the highest food insecurity rate in Canada. So in January 2020, we were faced with Snowmageddon, up to 100 centimeters of snow that resulted in 1 week of no electricity, business closures, and a lot of people's houses buried under snow. With food banks closing, a few of us started an initiative to distribute food to the doorstep of people who relied on food banks due to various reasons. So we started with a Facebook post, and in less than a day, we had 200 requests of people reaching out for help, but also people who wanted to help. So here's what we did. We realized early on that 5 of us couldn't do this alone. And the more we talked to our clients, in this case, the people who relied on our food banks, we realized that while providing food is needed as an immediate support, it's not a one-stop solution. So we started building our tribe of resources. We found people who has both passion and way more expertise than us, but we also invited people who wanted to learn and has fresh perspective. So we had a diversity of voices around the table. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel because true innovation is when you take something someone else has done and try to streamline it. So what we did was we reached out to almost every organization in Canada who had the same mission as us, and we asked them what they were doing, how they were doing it, and what were their lessons learned. And most importantly, we focused on purpose over process. What that meant was before we even started architecting a solution, we start with our problem statement. We then ask our client to prove or disprove our proof of concept, and ultimately, our purpose drives our processes and defines our outcomes. So in less than 3 years, here's what we were able to achieve. I'm not gonna go through it all because it will take a lot of time, and I know we are short on time, but not only we started with an initiative to help community members to provide food, but that initiative resulted in becoming an agile organization, creating a lot of job opportunities, engagement opportunities. And just last week, we launched our minimum viable product and being at the forefront of agri-tech innovation. Now let's talk about some of the challenges we face. It's not working, sorry. Now let's talk, before I move on to the challenges, if I can summarize my lessons learned that I learned from the nonprofit sector and that I applied to my job at the public sector, is that we need to establish cross-functional teams and break down silos between government departments. We need more inclusive decision-making, which basically means that we need to create an environment with psychological safety in place where your team can come to you with any risk, issues, and challenges without the hesitancy that is going to affect their job or performance. And lastly, we need to invest in agile training for public servants. And can we all agree that failure is not a bad word? If anything, it's a key component in becoming agile. So here, can government departments be truly agile? I think we can if we want to be, but we have to be very intentional about it. For example, in a lot of my past projects, I come across just procuring a simple license or software can take from weeks to months. So that's something we can start working on. There's also a mindset that agile is cost effective, but it's not true. when you start an agile project, you incur very unexpected costs due to its nature of innovation and experimentation. But in the long run, you end up saving a lot. And then, like I said, the cultural and the mindset shift that we need in the public service. So as agile leaders, we need to instill a culture of innovation and experimentation and encourage our team to take more risks. The good news is a lot of organizations are starting to implement some of the things that we heard today. We can start with establishing agile governance. What that means is creating a framework that streamlines the bureaucratic process and kind of move things forward for small projects at least. Effective prioritization. So if you're a leader, you will obviously get over 100 priorities or initiatives everywhere they're asking you to do. But you cannot overwhelm your team with it. You need to pick your priorities, and you need to make sure that you are communicating that with your team all the time with the understanding that because we are agile, it's going to be revisited as needed. And lastly, start with small agile project. To start making a cultural or mindset change, you need to start small and then eventually move on to the bigger projects. I can talk about this all day, so I decided to put a QR code up. If you scan it, it will take you to my LinkedIn profile. I post a lot, but if you want to have a discussion more about this, you can also email me, and I'll pass it back to you, Catherine. Sorry if I took a long time.
No, that's great. I think it's super interesting how you started here with the D&D big IT successes. You move into the reality of what happens when, the best laid plans of a bureaucrat with a minister dropping in on you unexpectedly, to what does that actually look like in a very micro example, where the solution is not always going to come from the government, and we don't need the government to come into every space, just like we don't need everything to be a project. I invite you all, well, maybe not every single one of you in the room needs to ask a question, but anyone who's got one in the back of your head, please feel free to come up to the mic. I was going to talk to you, Len. I don't know, you already have something, so maybe I should. No, what I was going to say was, you mentioned how we don't celebrate enough the successes. And I think, as someone who's been filtering around here all day, I see that a lot around IT-enabled projects, that they're really often the default is the focus on what's not fast enough, what's not, the features that aren't there. And so I would be interested in knowing, and you all kind of touched on, success, and the success is not only possible, but it's achievable all the time. Any thoughts on kind of what one or two key things that you've seen across these successes, key themes or key success factors that you think makes the difference between something you should and want to celebrate versus maybe the others?
Thanks. It's a great opportunity to finish that thought. So I don't know if it's our culture. We're Canadian. We don't brag. I don't know exactly. I can't put my fingers on it. It comes back to leadership, and I'm guilty. In the shadow of Phoenix, D&D delivered an HR management project called Guardian, which provided HR systems to the Canadian Armed Forces, 75,000 plus members. It was a huge HR project, and it delivered successfully, but it was in the shadow of another HR project that didn't go so well. And so politically, we weren't going to jump in, the Globe and Mail the next day to celebrate that. So there's a dynamic of things that keep us from maybe doing the right thing. I think there's an opportunity here, and what I've heard from my colleagues on stage is a couple of really good ideas. Smaller, fail fast kind of agile approaches, and celebrate your successes. When you get to that gate, you're not done, but you were successful at doing something. Give your team the benefit of recognition. Make your team diverse. Bring them in from across your organization. I mentioned at Defense, we have a dedicated division led by a director general doing nothing but IT projects, and it's a very closed organization. They grow and they build what they need. When we rolled Office 365 at Defense between March, and we had 125,000 accounts created and over 40,000 logins by June. It was because we didn't do it with our project teams. We went across the organization and grabbed able-bodied or maybe temporarily not able-bodied people who were willing and wanted to help for a short period of time. So it wasn't their day job, it wasn't their current role, but for a short period, a burst, an agile cycle of sorts, they joined the team. It proved to be very successful, and I'm proud to say that the person who led that is still at Defense and is a terrific leader, and Sophie Martel. If you have the opportunity to ask her more about that framework, it really is excellent. And finally, my last thought real quick, what I heard, the shift in funding is incredible. Authorities is a big deal in government. We have too many layers of accountability. In any of my projects, there was no one person accountable for it. I needed procurement authority from Public Works. I needed contract authority from Treasury Board. I needed spending authority from my deputy. There was just no one person. And if any of those things delayed, the whole project delayed. So who was going to be accountable for the project delayed? It turned out to be just the governance, and people just accepted that it was someone else's fault. I think if we want to get real about delivering fast, we need to hold and give someone the authority to be accountable, because it's going to change. And finally, on the, I know I said there was finally twice, but I just needed to re-emphasize BC's approach to funding. I think it's marvelous. I really do. One, the cloud isn't capitalizable, if that's a word. No. So you're going to need vote one in our terms. You're going to need that operating money, and the system is not wired to give it to you, because it's like everything they're doing. It pays salaries and it pays boots and bullets, but it doesn't necessarily want to go buy big, expensive IT capability, which is no longer going to be on your books. In fact, you're not going to own the cloud. Yeah. You're going to have to just use it. It's a commodity now. It's going to completely shift the funding, which gives you an opportunity to make some of these changes. Not final word, but an anecdote to think about. We had a space program. The first thing I did when I got to Defense was witness my predecessor's success in launching a satellite that was called the Surveillance of Space. The project was called Sapphire. The project, so that was the delivery of the capability, launching a satellite. That satellite only had 10 years of life. So in 2021, that satellite was falling out of the sky, or could have, because that's what we paid for. I had no more funding. 17, 18, we asked, the government said, no, we're going to mortgage our future. Of course we want surveillance of space. It wasn't until 2022 that they agreed to give us the money again. So now we start another build cycle that's going to probably bring them to 2027, 28 before the next satellite launches. We just had a deficiency gap created by our own. We got in our own way. Could we have funding in place so we could have started the build in 2013, 14, 15, while we knew that satellite was flying and operational? We could have been building the next one. With the funding model the way it is today, that would have been impossible. If we can get to that kind of model where vote one or program funding is available through the life cycle, I didn't think of it, but I love the idea of surge spending once in a while, because we all have ministers who get good ideas. And when you think of the political layer, don't forget, if we're going to shift from big vote 5 spending in infrastructure to smaller vote 1 spending, there's no more big announceables. So don't forget to deal with the strategic communications around that. Ministers love announceables. They love to announce billions of dollars in infrastructure, especially when it's in their ridings. So we need to think about the politics and the policy changes that need to occur. Anyway, so much. I have to stop.
There was a lot there. Yeah, for sure. Did you guys all take notes? I'm going to need some more. I think that's a super useful point. Sometimes when we get in the weeds of data projects, digital projects, we forget about the ecosystem in which government operates. Like, we're just the public servants. There's the whole political layer. There's the whole trust with Canadians and acceptability. And then there's the urgent emergency responses. I'm just going to put a pin in this because I know you have great things to share, Scott, but I see these people standing at the mics. And it's been a long day. I don't want them to tire out. So I'm going to... Were you there? Were you here first? I feel like maybe you were. Was he first? Okay. Thank you for continuing to be polite, Canadians.
That's okay. I'm targeting Scott anyways with my first question. So you alluded to this, I think, a little bit in your presentation about a shift towards product management. But for the whole panel, I'm curious about your thoughts of a shift towards product management versus project management.
Yeah. I guess I'll get started since the question was directed at me. So there's something to be said about projects that we need to kind of shift out of our mindset, which is this notion projects have a start and an end date. And the digital products that we're building today, like the digital products we use every single day in our everyday lives, don't have a definitive end date outside of the business going out of business. You don't see, your major tech companies saying, "Great, here's Amazon 1.0. I'll see you in 20 years." They'd go out of business pretty fast. And it's not to say government is a business, because government is not a business. And anyone telling you that is, I would say, highly misinformed. But we can't be treating what we make as if it's a static product made through a project. So that when all of that wonderful capital dries up and you say, "Okay, let's close the books, this project is done," that's it. Everybody goes home and moves on to the next project, because that's how we got into the hole that we're in now. That's why we have systems that are still running on COBOL. That's why we still have stuff that is literally hanging on shoestrings that could lead to some very bad consequences. That's how we got ourselves in this hole. And so product management, above and beyond just the general positives that it brings, also brings in a completely different mental model for us. It tells us that we are building something that needs to be responsive, that needs to be iterative, that needs to be improved as user needs change, that it's not something that we just get a gluttonous amount of money to build and then walk away from. So yeah, product management is great for a lot of reasons, but the reason I choose to emphasize from my own selfish perspective is I want the entire mental model of how we approach digital products in government to change, and adopting that product management mindset is the way there.
Either of you two want to jump into that? Okay, we'll take the next question, please.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah, it kind of relates a bit to the product management journey. We're making decisions, to seek Treasury Board approval for project authority and that sort of stuff, but we're having a really hard time planning for life cycle costs. So I really like that chart you had. I'm gonna probably repurpose it in my own department, but it's being able to really what is that product roadmap and how much is it going to cost? Because I think, especially in the digital space, I find, if you speak to a IT project manager or someone in IT, they're quick to want to just get a minimum viable product. Let's just get something and then we'll keep on being iterative and that sort of stuff. But the problem is that could have started with, you could have said yes to that first release. Maybe it's $300K. Next thing you know, it turns into a $30 million project, and you've just handcuffed the organization to that problem with the operating and the capital problem. So we need to be better at planning of what does the roadmap of this product really look like, and being iterative and agile so you're not investing everything up front. And so just wondering what, Len and our other colleague from Treasury Board's thoughts are, and yourself as well, if you've seen things in the British, in the BC government as well.
Thanks for that. I haven't seen this yet, but I'm very interested now in my new role with my colleagues at Treasury Board to look at ways we can move some of these gates. Think about, so traditionally we go identification, options analysis, then design, then implementation, then close it. What if we move design up a little bit, right? What if we were doing design during, options analysis, which is very much agile. It's a thought process. We need to change the funding and we need to change the authorities, yes, but that's very doable. And maybe we only do it for digital projects because they're the ones who are going to benefit, and we still build buildings and ships and planes using the traditional models. I think we just need a speedy checkout line for digital projects through Treasury Board. And that's what I'm looking for in my new role, is opportunities to bring some of these lessons learned. As proud as I am of the teams that I got to work with over the years and delivered all those projects, I know we could have done them better. And I think, now that we have to get on with digital services to Canadians, we're going to have to. So there's a lot of There's a lot of opportunity, and like I've seen it with this public service, is when there's a crisis, it really responds well. It really does. It figures it out. So I just think we just, before the next crisis, need to figure some of this stuff out. But your point is, what could we do? Just think about changing some of the framework when it comes to authorities and permissions and so forth. Food for thought.
I can add a little bit to that. I think the way I see product management and project management, the way to differentiate is there could be a lot of projects under a product, right? So as to your point, when you're building that product roadmap, you need to kind of keep a mental note of what other projects that there could be. And that brings to my other point of breaking down the silos between government departments, because there's very low chances that someone out there hasn't already done it or aren't doing it. So oftentimes we always try to reinvent the wheel, but if you just collect their data, what they did, they could have done the same project. If you're talking about digital transformation, maybe BC government have done a digital transformation project that Treasury Board, as an example, is doing now, but they did it 2 years ago. We can easily connect with them, get their data, even though it's not going to be the same, like it's not copy-paste solution, but at least you have insight to make better decisions and plan ahead. So that would be my 2 cents to kind of break down those silos between the government agencies.
So,
Go ahead.
yeah, I'll just add that I take a bit of a different approach here, which is I would go as far as saying that I want to fund product teams that don't ever have to come back for authorities at all. Like I want, our plan is to actually go to Treasury Board one time and say, we need product teams across government. Here's the products we have, we just need them. They will shift in what they're working on because, we don't know what we're gonna make, because how can you, they're unknown unknowns. Like we can't tell you exactly what we're gonna work on over the next 20 years. But I want money for X amount of product teams at Y ministry, and they're gonna work on a whole set of products. And where there's going to be the need for surge capacity, yes, you need to talk about why you need surge capacity, why that product team is not enough to get the job done. But the level of gates, the level of just impediments, bureaucracy, red tape, whatever you want to call it, in the model that we're proposing in BC is basically non-existent, because that product team model is permanently funded. They're always there. They're just another operating expense like any other in the organization.
It's going to be a huge shift for the people at finance. And your CFOs, right? Because they want to give you money with work attached to it. Yeah. Giving you money that the work isn't defined and costed and analyzed is going to be a shift. It's a cultural shift. And just as we wander down that path, I think these are the opportunities we need to discuss. Capability versus product versus project. We use the term in defense capability. Surveillance of space is just a capability. How we solve that problem, can be determined by the solution people in the design phase. LRT. I hope to God they don't try to change out the LRT every 10 years, but they're going to want to maintain it and operate it and enhance it. So there's got to be a model that fits that kind of capability existence that's going to exist.
The time is just flying. Do you see what happens when it's like you guys have agreed on the problem, you're positioned to actually try some things, be curious about it. As a public servant who doesn't work at Treasury Board, I'm feeling very optimistic about the future here. So thank you. I'm like, maybe it's the bright lights on the stage. I hope not. But over to you for what I think is going to be our last question.
So thank you. You guys have largely answered my question, to be perfectly honest, already. So I'm gonna shift it a bit, and apologies if it seems like I'm picking on our Treasury Board colleagues. But what struck me was, during your presentation at a micro level, you're saying trust your teams and so on and so forth. And then, like Len has mentioned many times, everyone has to go to Treasury Board for the authority and project management authority and the funding and all of that. So those two things seem fundamentally opposed to each other. So like I said, you've somewhat addressed that question already. So I guess I'm wondering, is there anything currently underway in Treasury Board? Like, how do we get this culture shift? It's good to say events like today are good to get people talking and stuff like that, but really until we get the big bosses to buy into this, we're still going to be on the hamster wheel. So just wondering if there's anything happening actively to try and move us in that direction from at the TB level.
I'll go quickly. Please.
Yeah, and then I can go.
And then I want you to, because one, hire more people like her, who come in with youth and exuberance and energy and all kinds of new ideas that and let me transition to retirement. But to your point, what's going on today? You've seen recent announcements where the Canadian Digital Services has been transferred to Service Canada. That's an effort led by the CIO for Canada, Catherine Lulo, and I'm here in a capacity as her special advisor. She comes again from private industry with the knowledge of what will work, and the idea of digital services, channels, holding people accountable, putting the conditions in place. It is happening. So watch what happens next. I would say Services Canada. It'll be given a mandate and held accountable. For digital services to Canadians. Doesn't mean it's going to deliver it all. It just means they're going to have that accountability to work with other departments, break down the barriers. And like I said, Catherine has come in with now over 2 years of influence. She's done something really positive, really great for the office of the CIO. She's built a capability that resembles now the Office of the Controller General, where the CIOs are held accountable, their development, to a functional authority. So she's just had such a tremendous influence over the last 2 years on our community that I just want to acknowledge her efforts, because she has made a difference. And some of her decisions, to your question, are starting to bear fruit, I would say. And you're going to see some of the impacts over the coming months and years.
I'll say to start with a conversation. A conversation goes a long way. For me, where I'm working now, I'm not at the same level, obviously, as the senior assistant deputy minister, but I think you can still do a lot at whichever level you are at. Like, you don't always necessarily need to be at a certain level to make those changes. Even I think the opposite. I think you can do way more if you are at the working level. And break the silos between your own team. Like, I have here group of my entire team, people working in the procurement, finance, everyone in different areas. So bring them together so you can make change within your own teams, and then you can kind of have the ripple effect within the organization.
Awesome. I saw you sneak in after I said the last question and, no, we're good. Please go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on product management. And one of the big things that we often have is, what is the product, right? Product could be a service, product could be an IT solution, could be, so I think we have to just all agree as to what is the product. And to your point about, the minister wants to have a deliverable, but imagine if you do truly embrace product management, which is, yes, finance, yes, iterative, fail fast, but make sure you learn from that failure. It's not just about failing and stuff, right? We have to learn. The outcome, what are you trying to achieve? And in product management is making sure that we have a measurable way of saying how I meet that outcome. So instead of saying, hey, I delivered Phoenix, it's awesome. I can say, hey, people are being paid on time, and this is the percentage of how much they are being paid on time. So it's like having that measurement thing, I think, is what will help us be able to say, hey, you got 3 months, you got some cash. What have you delivered? What value have you brought? So I just wanted to throw that out for thoughts. Thanks.
That's a great comment. Thank you for defying my rules and contributing that, because I think it's super valuable to think about the impact, right? So I will pitch it to you three.
Yeah.
And so if you can roll your comment aligning with what she just mentioned, and then any just parting quick thought for the audience, that'd be great.
I'm going to give my time to him, but thanks for engaging us in this today. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be it's not just a change in policy or change in direction that you can, sign your name to. It's a culture change. It's going to take a while. But if you commit to it and incrementally at every level, people are doing it, the successes will come, the confidence will come back, and IT projects won't be considered such a big risk with all that bureaucracy to protect them from us. So let's get on with that change. It'd be great.
I'll wrap up by saying that I think to the previous speaker, outcomes are really important. It's going to be important for us to take accountability for those outcomes. In the BC government, we have identified a specific person who is responsible for outcomes. And not just, to Len's earlier point, a governance body. I think we have to, yes, embrace uncertainty. We have to accept failure. But there are some very fundamental pieces that are missing that will enable us to do that. To give a very specific example that comes to mind that was triggered through this conversation. In the BC government, if you decide that you are failing on a capital project, you have to write it off, just like you would when you're doing any accounting. But that is considered an operating expense, and you don't have an operating budget. You have an incentive to not fail. And it's those kinds of fundamental structural issues that we have to work through if we want to enable everybody across the public service to deliver good digital products.
Thank you. I think both of you covered most of what I wanted to say, but I'll just leave with the parting thoughts that everything that you have all learned today, I would encourage you to share with your colleagues who couldn't be here. And maybe next year, try to get them here too, because these events like this really makes a difference, because we can candidly talk about some of the problem challenges and also some solutions and learn from one another as well. Thank you.
He needs. Well, you are the senior assistant
No, I
deputy
know. But
minister.
that's still on with that. Eh? Earlier in my answers, I used the word every able-bodied person. I want to apologize to anybody from the community of persons with disabilities. As former champion for that community at National Defence for almost a decade, I realized after I said it that what I had done, and so I just want to be clear, some of our best talents are not necessarily able-bodied, and they're quite capable. So if I could take that minute to apologize, I realized after I said it. I know this is a forum for openness, and I don't have a script, but I could have and should have done better. Appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for that and for all of your contributions. I would echo your input that getting together in this kind of, loosely formal, informal space is so valuable. Creates that, we talk about psychological safety. What does that look like when you're in the grind, week after week, day after day? Being able to pull yourself out, have a look around, engage with people you don't normally talk to or see. That was one of the most exciting things for me this morning was, wow, it's a room full of people that I don't already know. And, post-pandemic in a virtual / hybrid, whatever world, really have to actively seek out those connections with others. So thank you. That's my way of saying thank you all for coming. For sure, the panelists are going to have to walk through all of you to get out of the room. So feel free to approach them with any questions, comments, suggestions, ideas on the way out. Time goes by so fast, but I really appreciate the very frank conversation and the very concrete actions. And my takeaway around that Treasury Board is not just broadcasting to departments, but it very much can be a conversation. There can be space for learning from the experiences of others. And so I'd encourage you to hit them up while they're still, before. Yeah. The refreshments are upstairs now, and even better refreshments will be upstairs at 5 o'clock. So enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.